Madam President.
Senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to bring attention to the process which this body is considering not just this massive spending bill, but the way in which we've handled all the very limited business that's come before this chamber this entire year. Before I do that, I would like to say we've got some folks in the gallery and we've got people tuning in, and I'm sure everyone watched the Super Bowl last night, where the Kansas City Chiefs won in overtime. I think it was only the second overtime win. Patrick Mahomes, anytime he's got the ball, the last guy to have the ball usually wins, and in big games this is becoming a thing. And the Chiefs essentially now are in a dynasty. So Patrick Mahomes has been in the league for 6 years. He's won 3 Super Bowls, three out of 4 trips, 3 in the last 5 years. So it was a great game, and certainly glad our Kansas City Chiefs won, with my not sincerest apologies to the California Senators. I would be probably disingenuous if I said that, but it was a good game, and congratulations to the Chiefs on a well-deserved another championship. Right before that game yesterday, and finished just in the nick of time, essentially for the kickoff, I rose on this floor to talk about what has happened at our southern border. Now, in this bill that we're considering now, there's nothing in there for our southern border. It's gone. To the extent there was ever anything, this is now an exclusively foreign aid package. And I can't probably make the case strong enough of what a disconnect that really is from what the American people care about. And I know there'll be some people in this chamber that say, well, they just don't, as much as we tell them, they just don't understand. No, I think they do understand. I think they do understand. They see a federal government that is $34 trillion in debt, with a president that wants to spend trillions and trillions more this year than we take in, no real sanity in sight, and no real process for senators to actually weigh in on these important matters. I went through the laundry list of how we got here. The punchline is, not to recap that, and maybe I will tomorrow, but the punchline is Joe Biden has every authority he needs right now under existing law to secure our southern border. He just doesn't do it. He doesn't want to. Because on day one, the executive orders that were in place that were effective under President Trump, he got rid of. Whether it was Remain in Mexico, Title 42, a number of them we rolled through last night. Even right now, as we stand here, talk here, Joe Biden could do all those things, and he actually could stop abusing the parole process, where those are supposed to be individualized adjudications, but instead, millions of people, millions, are being released en masse because they're from a particular country or category. That's illegal. So if you wonder how we got here, that's how we got here. And you don't need another bill to fix that. You need a president who wants to fix it. Now, we could have a real debate on the Senate floor with all of us about how we go about improving existing law, but we don't do that either. We have secret negotiations with a couple senators. Some people liked the product, some people didn't, but the process, there's no doubt about it, is totally broken. And that played out last week. So that's why I want to talk about it. It turns out there are a few other senators. I know Senator Lee, Senator Blackburn, I think Senator Vance probably touched on this, and there's a lot of other people, and not just Republicans, by the way, that feel that this process that is in place now is broken and people don't have an opportunity to weigh in. Before I leave the border, though, I do want to mention one thing. If there's one thing that could crystallize the lunacy of this administration's policy, there was something under President Trump called Operation Talon. You didn't hear much about it because it was canceled very early on. What is Operation Talon? Operation Talon was an effort to deport previously convicted sex offenders from other countries. There's a lot that divides us, but I don't know. I would think that's something we could come together on. Maybe we want to deport people who've been previously convicted of sex offenses. Evidently not. That was too difficult for the Biden administration to accept, probably because Trump did it. That reflexive desire to undo success, to appease the group clamoring for more compassion at the border, has completely backfired. Women and children are being raped on their way to the southern border. The cartels are in control. Fentanyl is streaming across. Human trafficking, that when I went down to the border when I was Attorney General of Missouri, was valued then at the time, when we probably saw 2/3 of the level of illegal immigration that we see right now, was valued at $100 million a week. $100 million a week for the human trafficking alone. Some of that's the worst stuff that you could possibly imagine, but some of it also was people being trafficked across, being placed in employment in cities across this country, being taken advantage of, and if they ever expressed any concern, their family might get killed back home. There's nothing compassionate about what's happening at our border. The media won't cover it. My suspicion is if this was happening under the previous administration, NBC Nightly News would be camped out for about a year at the southern border. But that's not what we see. So what do we see here? We see 98 senators, 96 senators locked out. And I mean this as a call to any colleagues who are listening, and I've had many of these conversations already. There is a better way. We can strike some real reform on the way that we handle things. Regular orders talked about, an open amendment process is talked about. There are a couple people who don't want to see that happen. Senator Schumer certainly doesn't want to see that happen. Think about the power he gets to wield. Come to me. I am the one that gets to come down from the mountain and unveil the tablets. You'll be cast aside if you dare try to change what's been, carved into stone. That is not what our republic is supposed to be like. Each one of us from different states, and Madam President, our states share a border along the Mississippi River. Well, there's a lot of things we have in common as Missourians and Illinoisans. My wife is from Illinois, has family there, we get to visit. There's a lot of things that we agree on, but there are also things that are different. We have a system of federalism. And the founders had a really unique opportunity at the time, 240 some odd years ago, to create a government from whole cloth. They got the unique opportunity to create structural safeguards to protect individual liberty. They were students of human history. They understood the dangers of consolidation of power, of what it meant to have a single person in charge of too many things. They had seen it play out, and it plays out in the world today. So a system of government was created to spread out that power, vertically and horizontally. The states came together and unanimously agreed on the very limited powers they wanted the federal government to have, and the states retained the rest. The states were sovereign. They made this compact. The first one didn't work with the Articles of Confederation, but the Constitution has stuck, thank God. And in that Constitution, the Article 1 branch is the first one mentioned, of course, because what we do here has enormous impact on people, and we're supposed to be connected to the people, not cloaked away telling everyone we know better than them. The idea that as a United States Senator, you cannot come to this floor and say, I have an idea. I have a way that I think would improve this bill, and offer it and have people vote on it, is totally insane to me. Maybe I have not been here long enough to have that idealism beaten out of me, but I will never lose that. I will never lose that desire, sincere desire, no matter your political party, to have the ability to come out here and try to persuade, or your willingness to be persuaded. Unique coalitions can be formed from that. All of that's taken out. So for me, some diagnosis of why this place is so dysfunctional, there are zero vehicles. Well, there are very limited vehicles. So for the folks in the gallery who are coming here today, or the people listening, what you think happens here doesn't happen here. I mean, I think back a little over a year ago when I was sworn in, or before I got sworn in, there was an orientation that we go through, and you meet the people that are going to have this shared experience with you as a freshman member of the United States Senate. I mean, it is humbling, and I speak for myself, and I think for all the freshman members, Republicans or Democrats, I mean, understand what a unique privilege this is to serve in this chamber. And when I signed my name in that book, I was number 2,000, which is kind of cool. And you learn a lot, and you actually are given some reading materials. Now, I've always kind of had an interest in particularly this chamber, in the unique role that it plays in our republic. It's supposed to be, there's a reason why, it takes 60 votes to get to move. It's not supposed to be a place where simple majority rules. That's for the House of Representatives, which of course every 2 years has elections. It's supposed to be more rooted in the kind of changes that can happen every couple of years. The Senate, it's staggered terms every 6 years. It's supposed to be more deliberative. This body is not deliberative. It's deliberately exclusionary. What have we seen? So anyway, you read about how the Senate used to operate. I'm not talking about ancient history. I'm talking about a couple decades ago. I mean, in the course of a republic, it's certainly not that big of a breach in time, where a senator would have an amendment and it'd get voted on. And there's something that happens in that process. If a senator's got 80 amendments, the colleagues are going to come up and say, Senator from Nebraska or whoever it would be, we get it. Are you sure all of them are necessary? Maybe they are. Maybe they're not. There's sort of a social pressure that comes into play, and you start, figuring out what are the most important things. You start to see where the body might be if you have similar issues that have come up on amendments. There's a flow to it. Right now, there's no flow. We come in here a couple times a week in a 45-minute window to say yes or no to some judicial nominations. Because Chuck Schumer, you better go to his office. You want anything to happen. If you want some glorious omnibus monstrosity, that's where you head. And it's worth pointing out that we've already done a couple of these CRs. We're headed to another. And guess how much time we've dedicated to appropriations bills? In almost 14 months since I've been here, We have spent a grand total of 8 hours on one piece of legislation that combined 3 appropriation bills. That's it. So for a government that is bankrupt, borrowing money to spend, that's the kind of respect that the majority leader has given to the American people on perhaps the most important thing we're supposed to do every day or every year, which is to kind of sift through our priorities. That's been robbed from this place. It is my sincere hope that in this place, a group of us can come together, a bipartisan group together, and demand real reforms. This idea of filling a tree it's totally antithetical. So I mentioned sort of the founders created a system they were weary of and concerned of aggregations of power. I can't think of a greater aggregation of power in what's supposed to be a place where power is diffused among the 100 of us than one person getting to decide that amendments don't get to come on. Now look, by the way, this is a point made for my Republican colleagues and Democrat colleagues about objecting and withholding consent. I think there's a lot of muscle memory that needs to get back into this place where we're allowed to vote. But you see the frustration. I mean, you don't need to be like a social scientist to figure out where the frustration comes from. There's not that many vehicles. Something gets bounced of yours. People, human nature, they maybe want to bounce something from somebody else. I guess my plea here is that we use this, regardless of how you feel about this particular bill, this slow-moving train wreck of how we do business here, that everybody privately kind of looks at this and says, this is not the way. This can't be the way. And then you have a bubbling up among members, rank and file members, to demand something different. But we can't get there if we just go along with this stuff every time because somebody says this is how you're supposed to vote. You'll get out of here, in 3 hours. Every time that happens, individual senators cede really important autonomy to help shape legislation that will affect people's lives. Or refuse, in this instance, to get serious about potentially demanding our southern border is secured before we send another $61 billion to another country. The appropriations process, I know that there's been some progress made in that committee, and I commend Senator Collins and Senator Murray for the work that they put in. It doesn't necessarily mean I agree with all of the work product necessarily, but that process that they went through is very important. And then what's supposed to happen is, it's like the old how a bill becomes a law. Those bills, each one of them, are supposed to come out on their own. Senators would have an idea or amend it or not. We send it over to the House, or more appropriately for those bills, comes over from the House, and then we have vehicles to do that on the Senate. But something happens in that process too. There's going to be disagreements, and I don't care who's in charge, or different parties are in charge between the two chambers. There's going to be different priorities. There's going to be different ideas. That's healthy. And then you work it out in a conference committee. And then it goes back to each chamber, up or down vote. That's how it's supposed to work. That's not how it works. Not even close. And we're already sort of creeping towards, again, talk about an embarrassment of riches for Chuck Schumer. He's got another couple CRs coming his way. And then what you get to is a couple days before, or a day before, or 5 hours before, here it is. You need to support this, Senator Schmitt or Senator Scott or whoever, or you're in favor of shutting down the government. And let me read off the parade of terribles of the things that will happen that you will be responsible for if you don't vote for this thing that I came up with in my basement 4 hours ago. It's crazy. And I know that many of my senator friends agree with me. I've had these conversations. If you're in your office and you agree with me, blink twice. We're all being held hostage here. So I guess in the limited time that I have here, and if we have more time later, I'll continue to talk about this, but I just think there's real opportunities for reform. I mean that sincerely. I mean that as a gesture of goodwill, and it doesn't need to be the stuff, it doesn't even need to be my amendment. I'm prepared to win. I'm prepared to lose. I just think it's healthy for this place to have vehicles where people can offer these sorts of amendments, where they can have regular order. But I want to talk specifically about sort of where we're at with this one. We had a negotiation among a few people that produced a product that a lot of people didn't support. And that's not a personal attack on anyone, quite the contrary. I appreciate the effort as Senator Langford worked very hard. There were a lot of things that were very problematic from my perspective, not to relitigate that, but only to say that I think part of that, the lesson from it is, there's got to be more buy-in. There's got to be more input. And that all shouldn't happen, where nobody can see it, or there's broad strokes, because, I'm a little biased here as a lawyer. The language actually does matter. And I think from the get-go, by the way, my position on this has been, I think, consistent. Could roll the tape from when I was on this floor talking about it. I think that these issues should be spread out separately. I don't think Ukraine money should be tied to Israel money, should be tied to Taiwan money. I think it's a mistake. And again, I think it robs the ability of individual senators to say, that situation's different. Take the difference between Ukraine money and Israel money. There's different levels of support in this place. There's different likelihoods of success. There's different needs. There's different coalitions of allies around the world that can step up or haven't stepped up. But to continually come back to the American people without an articulated plan here or what victory looks like as it relates to Ukraine, you're denying a reality of the justified skepticism. And I'll just speak for my state. Missouri is the show-me state. Missouri has always been skeptical, and I don't care if it was Harry Truman or Kit Bond or whoever, who, by the way, stood at this desk, who were skeptical of a government 1,000 miles away telling them how to live their lives. Or in this instance, a federal government saying to Missourians and the American people, securing the southern border isn't a priority, but sending 60+ billion to Ukraine is today. And it's so important. We're here all weekend. I don't care about that. But all business aside,